Danny Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the drilling equipment one last time. The deep mines of New Terra Colony always ran hot, but today felt different. The massive drill bit had been acting strange all morning, and Danny knew something was wrong with the power flow. He had worked as an engineer in these tunnels for 5 years, and could feel, when the machines were not running right, the communication device on his belt crackled to life. "Danny, we need you up top right away," came the voice of his supervisor. "Something big is happening." Danny climbed the long ladder to the surface level. When he reached the top, he saw people running everywhere. The sky above New Terra looked wrong. Dark shapes moved across the stars like giant shadows. Lisa Rodriguez, one of the colonial Marines stationed at the base, grabbed his arm as he stepped out of the mine entrance. "They came out of nowhere," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Ships bigger than anything we have ever seen. They are not responding to any of our signals." Danny looked up and saw the alien vessels for the first time. They were massive and shaped like twisted crystals. The ships moved in perfect formation, blocking out the light from the 3 moons that normally lit up the night sky. Red beams shot down from the vessels, hitting the colony's defense towers. Each beam cut through the metal like it was paper. "What do they want?" Danny asked. "Us," Lisa replied. "They want us." The attack happened fast. The alien ships landed near the main settlement and strange creatures poured out. Danny had never seen anything like them. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with bodies that looked like they were made of living crystal. Their skin was hard and smooth, reflecting the light from the burning buildings around them. They moved on 6 legs, giant insects, but walked upright like humans. Danny watched in horror as the creatures used strange weapons to stun the colonists. The weapons did not kill, but made people fall down and stop moving. The aliens picked up the unconscious humans and carried them toward their ships. They worked with cold efficiency, like they had done this many times before. "We have to run," Lisa said, pulling Danny toward the forest. But it was too late. One of the creatures appeared in front of them. It raised its weapon and fired. Danny felt electricity course through his body, and then everything went black. When Danny woke up, he was lying on a cold metal floor. His head hurt and his body felt weak. He looked around and saw hundreds of other humans in the same large room. They were all inside what looked like a cargo hold of a spaceship. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the alien creatures. Peter Johnson, a young mechanic from the outer settlements, sat nearby. His face was pale and his hands shook. "They took everyone," Peter said quietly. "The whole colony is gone." Then he tried to stand, but his legs were still weak from the weapon. "Where are we going?" "I do not know," Peter replied, "but I heard some of the others talking. These things are called Zephyrians. They have been taking humans from colonies all across the frontier." Over the next few days, Danny learned more about their situation. The Zephyrians were part of a vast empire that controlled hundreds of worlds. They saw humans as useful animals, good for dangerous work that even their machines could not handle. The ship they were on was taking them to slave markets, where they would be sold to different owners. Lisa Rodriguez was also in the cargo hold. She had managed to stay conscious longer than most during the capture, and had learned some important information. "They think we are primitive," she told Danny and Peter. "They use technology we cannot even understand, but they see us as barely more than smart animals." The Zephyrians rarely spoke to their prisoners, but when they did, their voices sounded like grinding metal. Danny learned that their society was built on rigid levels of power. The lowest Zephyrians worked as soldiers and guards. The higher ones owned property and controlled trade. At the top were the overlords, who ruled entire systems. During the long journey through space, Danny also heard whispers about something that even the Zephyrians feared. The other prisoners called it the Void Stalker. It was described as an ancient creature that had existed since before any of the current civilizations. No one knew where it came from or what it really was. All they knew was that it appeared without warning and consumed everything in its path, even the Zephyrians withal. Their technology cannot fight it. An older prisoner named Jake Sullivan told them. Jake had been a ship captain before his capture and had heard stories from traders across the galaxy. When the Void Stalker comes, entire fleets just disappear. Whole planets go dark. Nothing can stop it. Danny listened to these stories, but focused on more immediate concerns. He studied everything he could about the ship they were on and the Zephyrians who guarded them. He watched how their technology worked and tried to understand their language. Most importantly, he began to think about escape and survival. The slave ship continued its journey toward the Zephyrian markets. Danny knew that whatever happened, next he would need every bit of knowledge and skill he could gather. The universe had suddenly become a much more dangerous place, and humans were no longer the masters of their own fate. The slave market on Zentha Station smelled like fear and despair. Danny stood in a metal cage with 20 other humans, while alien buyers walked past and examined them like livestock. The Zephyrians spoke in their grinding voices, pointing at different prisoners and discussing their potential value. Overlord Krikstal stopped in front of Danny's cage. The massive Zephyrian was larger than the soldiers, with darker crystal skin that showed his higher rank. His 6 eyes studied Danny with cold intelligence. "This one looks strong enough for deep mining," Krikstal said to his assistant. "The readings show he has technical knowledge." Danny was sold along with Lisa Rodriguez and Peter Johnson. They were loaded onto another transport ship, this one smaller and more cramped than the vessel that had brought them from New Terra. The journey to Paraxis Prime took 3 days. During the trip, Danny met other slaves who had been working for Krikstal for months or years. Jake Sullivan had been captured during a trading mission 3 years ago. He had been the captain of his own cargo ship before the Zephyrians destroyed his crew and took him prisoner. "The key to survival is staying useful," Jake told Danny as they sat in the transport hold. "Krikstal keeps the workers who produce results and gets rid of the ones who cannot keep up." Maria Santos had been a research scientist studying alien technology when her laboratory was raided. She was brilliant and had learned to speak some of the Zephyrian language during her 2 years of captivity. "They think we are stupid because our technology is less advanced," Maria explained. "But they need us for work that is too dangerous. For their own kind." Paraxis Prime was a volcanic world with a red sky and constant heat. The mining complex where they would work was built into the side of a massive mountain. Lava flows could be seen in the distance, creating an orange glow on the horizon. The air was thick and hard to breathe. The slave quarters were underground, tunnels carved from the rock. Each person got a small sleeping space and basic food twice a day. The work schedule was brutal. 12 hours in the mines, followed by 8 hours of rest, and back to work again. There were no days off and no breaks except for meals. Danny was assigned to the deepest mining level, where the most valuable crystals could be found. These crystals powered Zephyrian technology and were worth more than entire human colonies. The work was dangerous because the tunnels were unstable and the heat was almost unbearable. Several humans had died in cave-ins during the past year. Mining equipment was advanced, but designed for Zephyrian physiology. Humans had to adapt the tools to work with their smaller hands and different body structure. Danny used his engineering knowledge to modify the drilling machines, making them more efficient and safer to operate. This caught the attention of the Zephyrian overseers, who began giving him more responsibility. Lisa Rodriguez was assigned to maintenance work on the upper levels. Her military training helped her organize the other workers and improve their safety procedures. She also began teaching basic combat skills to the humans, disguising the training as exercise routines. The Zephyrians did not pay much attention as long as the work continued. Peter Johnson worked in the equipment bay, repairing tools and machines. His mechanical skills were valuable because the harsh environment of Paraxis Prime caused frequent breakdowns. Peter learned to fix Zephyrian technology by studying how it functioned and experimenting with different approaches. During their off hours, the 5 humans began meeting in secret. They shared information about the mining complex, the guard routines, and the Zephyrian technology they had observed. Danny was particularly interested in the power systems that ran the facility. The same crystals they mined were used to generate energy for the entire operation. Jake Sullivan had made contacts with other slave groups throughout the complex. There were nearly 1,000 human prisoners working for Crickstall, plus several hundred aliens from other conquered species. Most had given up hope of escape, but a small number were willing to work toward resistance. The news from outside was grim. Maria Santos had learned to understand Zephyrian communications by listening to the guards. She discovered that the Void Stalker had become active again after decades of silence. Several Zephyrian colonies had gone dark in the past few months. Entire military fleets had been sent to investigate and never returned. The Zephyrians are scared, Maria told the group during one of their secret meetings. They have faced the Void Stalker before and lost every time. Their technology means nothing against that creature. Danny listened to the reports with growing interest. He had been studying everything he could about the Void Stalker through overheard conversations and stolen data files. The creature seemed to be attracted to advanced technology and high-energy sources. It fed on entire planets, draining them of all power and life. What if the creature comes here? Peter asked. Then we all die, Jake replied grimly. According to every report, nothing survives when the Void Stalker appears. But Danny was thinking differently. He had noticed patterns in the creature's attacks that the Zephyrians seemed to miss. The Void Stalker always went for the most technologically advanced targets first. It was drawn to power sources and energy signatures, like a predator hunting prey. The work in the mines continued despite the growing fear among the Zephyrian overseers. Danny observed how nervous the guards had become. They watched the sky more often, and their communications were more frequent. Overlord Crickstall had increased security around the facility and moved some of his personal assets to other locations. Danny began developing a plan, though he kept it to himself for now. If the Void Stalker did come to Paraxis Prime, the Zephyrians would rely on their advanced weapons and defensive systems. But what if those very technologies were what attracted the creature in the first place? What if the answer was not more advanced technology, but something simpler? The mining work gave Danny access to basic materials and simple tools. He began collecting small items and hiding them in his sleeping quarters. Lisa noticed his activities, but did not ask questions. She trusted Danny's engineering mind and knew he was working on something important. As the days passed, the reports of Void Stalker attacks grew closer to their location. The creature was moving through Zephyrian space, destroying everything in its path. Danny realized they might not have much time before it reached Paraxis Prime. He needed to be ready with a plan that could save not just the human slaves, but possibly the entire facility from the approaching terror. The alarm started screaming at dawn. Danny had never heard such a sound before, a piercing wail that seemed to shake the very walls of the mining complex. He was deep in the tunnels when the noise began, working on extracting a particularly large crystal formation. The Zephyrian overseers immediately abandoned their posts and ran toward the surface. What is happening? Peter shouted over the alarm noise. He had been working nearby on a drilling machine that had broken down the day before. Danny dropped his tools and grabbed Peter's arm. We need to get to the others now. They climbed the tunnel ladders as fast as they could. Other human slaves were doing the same thing, all moving toward the main levels where they might find answers. The Zephyrian guards were nowhere to be seen, which was unusual because they normally watched the workers constantly. On the surface level, chaos had taken over. Zephyrian soldiers ran in every direction, while officers screamed orders in their grinding language. Danny found Lisa Rodriguez near the equipment bay, where she had been working on ventilation systems. Her face was pale but determined. "Look at the sky," she said, pointing upward. Danny looked up and felt his blood turn cold. Something massive was blocking out the stars. It was not a ship or any kind of vehicle he could recognize. The thing in space looked like a living shadow, constantly changing shape as it moved. Parts of it seemed solid, while other sections appeared to be made of pure darkness. It was easily the size of a small moon god. Maria Santos appeared beside them, having run from the communications center where she had been translating messages. "The Void Stalker," she said breathlessly. It just appeared without warning. The Zephyrian fleet tried to engage it, but their ships disappeared as soon as they got close. Jake Sullivan joined their group, his expression grim. "I saw Overlord Crickstall heading for his personal escape ship. He is abandoning the facility." As if to confirm Jake's words, they saw several small Zephyrian vessels launching from the landing bays. The ships climbed rapidly toward orbit, trying to escape before the creature could reach them. But as each ship got close to the Void Stalker, dark tentacles of energy reached out and wrapped around them. The vessel simply vanished, leaving no debris or explosion. "It feeds on technology," Danny said, watching the destruction. "The more advanced the ship, the faster it gets consumed." The Void Stalker began to descend toward Paraxis Prime. As it got closer, Danny could see that it was not entirely solid. The creature seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, with parts of its body flickering in and out of reality. Where the solid portions touched space, everything around them simply ceased to exist. The mining complex's defensive systems activated automatically. Massive energy cannons emerged from hidden positions and began firing at the approaching creature. The weapons were powerful enough to destroy battleships, but their beams passed through the Void Stalker without any effect. The creature did not even seem to notice the attacks. "The defense grid is only making it stronger," Maria observed. "Look how it moves toward the energy sources." She was right. The Void Stalker oriented itself toward the weapons and began moving faster in their direction. Each energy beam it absorbed seemed to make it larger and more solid. The creature was feeding on the very weapons designed to destroy it. The first tentacle touched the planet's surface, near the main power plant. Where it made contact, everything simply stopped existing. The ground did not explode or melt. It just disappeared as if it had never been there. A perfect spherical void appeared, growing larger as the tentacle pushed deeper. Panic spread through the remaining Zephyrians. Those who had not escaped in the first wave now realized that their ships would never reach orbit alive. The creature's influence was growing stronger as it fed on the planet's energy sources. Emergency power systems activated throughout the complex, but these only attracted more attention from the monster. Danny gathered his friends in the shelter of an equipment building. "We need to get away from all the technology," he said. "Every machine, every power source, every piece of advanced equipment is calling to that thing." "Where can we go?" Peter asked. "The whole complex runs on Zephyrian technology." "The old mining tunnels," Jake suggested. "The deepest ones where they stopped using automated systems. We might be safer there." But as they prepared to move, Danny noticed something important. The Void Stalker was not feeding randomly. It had a pattern, a method to its consumption. The creature went for the highest energy sources first, and worked its way down to smaller targets. It was like watching a predator hunt, but on a scale that covered an entire planet. "Wait," Danny said, stopping the group from leaving. "I need to see more of how it works." Despite the danger, Danny watched as the creature extended more tentacles toward the surface. Each one sought out sources of power and technology. The main fusion reactor that powered the mining complex was consumed in seconds. The communication arrays vanished next, followed by the transportation systems. But the creature was not just destroying things. It was learning from them. As each piece of technology was absorbed, the Void Stalker seemed to understand it better. The monster was gaining knowledge about Cypherian civilization with every system it consumed. It knows about their technology now, Danny realized. That is why it can find their ships so easily. It understands how their systems work. The ground began to shake as the creature settled more of its mass onto the planet's surface. Cracks appeared in the walls of buildings that had stood for decades. The very foundations of the mining complex were being affected by the monster's presence. More Zephyrian escape attempts failed. Every ship that launched was caught and consumed before it could reach safe distance. The few remaining aliens in the complex had given up trying to flee and were now hiding in the deepest bunkers. They could find Danny studied the creature's feeding pattern more carefully. There was something about the way it moved, something that reminded him of natural phenomena he had seen before. The Void Stalker was not just randomly destructive. It followed rules, even if those rules were beyond normal understanding. "I think I know how to hurt it," Danny said quietly. His friends looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Nothing can hurt that thing," Lisa said. "It just destroyed the most powerful military technology in the galaxy." "That is exactly the problem," Danny replied. "Everyone tries to fight it with advanced technology. But what if that is what makes it stronger? What if the answer is to use something simpler?" The Void Stalker continued its systematic consumption of the mining complex, but Danny was no longer watching in despair. He was studying the creature like an engineering problem, looking for weaknesses and vulnerabilities that others had missed. Somewhere in the monster's behavior was the key to defeating it. The unkillable beast had arrived, but Danny Martinez was beginning to see how a human slave might prove the legends wrong. While the Zephyrians cowered in their bunkers, and their technology failed them completely, Danny Martinez gathered the human slaves in the deepest part of the old mining tunnels. The ancient sections had been carved by hand decades ago, before automated systems took over the work. Here, far from the complex's power grid and advanced machinery, they had a chance to think and plan. "You really believe we can fight that thing?" Jake Sullivan asked, his voice echoing off the rough stone walls. Around them, nearly 200 human slaves had taken shelter. They were all that remained of the workforce, the others having been caught on the surface when the creature began its feeding. "Not fight it," Annie corrected. "Understand it." He had been watching the Void Stalker's behavior through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. Every creature, even something like this, has to follow certain rules. It feeds on energy, but there's a pattern to how it does it. Maria Santos had salvaged some basic calculation tools before fleeing to the tunnels. She spread rough diagrams on the tunnel floor, showing what they had observed. The creature moves in a spiral pattern when it feeds. It starts with the highest energy sources and works its way down. But look at this. She pointed to her sketches. When it absorbed the main reactor, its size increased by roughly 30%. When it took the smaller power systems, the growth was much less. It's not just eating energy, it's converting it into physical mass. Lisa Rodriguez had organized the other slaves into work groups. Some were gathering supplies from the abandoned sections of the mine. Others were scouting safe routes through the tunnels. Her military training had taught her the importance of preparation and coordination. "What kind of supplies do we need?" she asked Danny. Danny looked around at the crude tools and basic materials available to them. Everything the Zephyrians would consider primitive. Hand tools, simple chemicals from the mining operations, basic mechanical devices. Nothing electronic, nothing that uses advanced technology. Peter Johnson had found a cache of old mining equipment in one of the storage areas. Pickaxes, manual drills, pulleys, and rope. The kind of tools that had been used before the Zephyrians introduced their advanced systems. "This stuff looks ancient," he said. "Perfect," Danny replied. "That monster has been consuming advanced civilizations for millions of years. It knows how to handle energy weapons, force fields, and starships. But I don't think it has ever encountered anything like this." Danny's plan was beginning to take shape. He had noticed something crucial about the Void Stalker's feeding behavior. The creature was attracted to energy signatures and technological complexity. The more sophisticated the target, the more aggressively it attacked. But it seemed to ignore things that registered as natural or primitive. "The mining tunnels follow the volcanic vents," Danny explained to his core group. "Paraxis Prime has massive lava tubes running through the planet's crust. If we can access them, we might be able to use the planet's own geological forces." Maria understood immediately. "You want to trigger a volcanic eruption." "Not exactly," Danny said. "Something more precise. The creature is feeding on the planet's core energy now. If we can disrupt that process at exactly the right moment, we might be able to trap it." The plan required careful timing and coordination. Danny sent teams to different parts of the tunnel system to gather specific materials. They needed industrial explosives from the mining supplies, metal cable from the lifting equipment, and access to the volcanic monitoring systems that the Zephyrians had installed decades ago. Jake Sullivan led a team to the old communication center in the abandoned section of the complex. The equipment there was primitive by Zephyrian standards, using basic radio waves instead of quantum transmissions. If that thing ignores primitive technology, maybe it won't notice these old systems. He reasoned. Lisa took another group to collect explosive materials from the mining stockpiles. The charges used for breaking rock were simple chemical devices, nothing like the advanced weapons the Zephyrians had tried to use against the creature. "We have enough explosives to bring down half the mountain," she reported back. Peter worked on modifying the mining equipment to serve their purposes. Using basic mechanical principles, he created timing devices that would trigger the explosives in sequence. No electronics, no computers, just springs and gears working together like clockwork. Meanwhile, Danny studied the volcanic monitoring data that Maria had retrieved. Paraxis Prime sat on top of a massive magma chamber that fed the planet's numerous volcanoes. The Zephyrian mining operation had been built directly over one of the main lava tubes, using the geothermal energy to supplement their power systems. "The creature is destabilizing the planet's core," Danny observed. "Its feeding is causing pressure changes in the magma chamber. If we can time this right, we can use that instability against it." The Void Stalker continued its systematic consumption of the mining complex above them. Through the cracks in the tunnel ceiling, they could see the dark tentacles reaching deeper into the planet's crust. The creature had grown noticeably larger since arriving. Its mass expanded by all the technology it had absorbed. Danny's plan required them to work in the most dangerous part of the tunnel system, near the active lava flows. The heat was almost unbearable, and the risk of cave-ins was constant. But these were the passages that connected to the main volcanic vents, the arteries of the planet's geological system. "Are you sure this will work?" Peter asked as they prepared to move deeper into the mountain. "No," Danny admitted, "but every other approach has failed. Advanced weapons, energy shields, military tactics, nothing works against that creature. Maybe the answer is to stop thinking like an advanced civilization and start thinking like humans." The work was brutal and dangerous. They had to place explosive charges at precise locations along the lava tubes, connecting them with mechanical timers that would create a chain reaction. The timing had to be perfect, coordinated with the creature's feeding cycle and the natural pressure rhythms of the volcanic system. Maria continued monitoring the Void Stalker's behavior, calculating its movement patterns and energy consumption rate. "It's following a predictable schedule," she reported. "Every 6 hours, it pauses its feeding to process what it has absorbed. That's when it will be most vulnerable." Lisa organized the placement teams, ensuring that each group knew exactly what to do and when to do it. The margin for error was 0. If they triggered the sequence too early or too late, the plan would fail and they would all die. Danny made the final preparations, checking each component of their improvised system. It was incredibly simple compared to Zephyrian technology. Nothing more than basic physics and chemistry working together. But sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. As they prepared for the most dangerous phase of their plan, Danny looked around at his fellow humans. They were slaves, considered primitive and expendable by their alien captors. But now they were about to attempt something that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had never accomplished. The unkillable beast was about to learn that human ingenuity could be more dangerous than any advanced weapon. The countdown began at exactly midnight, Paraxis Prime time. Danny Martinez checked his mechanical timer one last time, a simple device made from mining equipment parts that would coordinate their attack. Above them, the Void Stalker had grown to enormous size, its dark mass covering nearly half the visible sky. The creature was deep into its feeding cycle, its tentacles buried far into the planet's core. "All teams in position," Lisa Rodriguez whispered into the primitive communication device. The old radio system crackled with confirmations from the 5 groups positioned throughout the volcanic tunnel system. Each team had their assigned location and timing sequence memorized. Maria Santos watched the monitoring equipment they had salvaged from the abandoned geological station. "The creature's energy absorption is reaching peak levels," she reported quietly. "Core temperature is rising faster than normal. The magma pressure is building exactly as you predicted." Danny nodded grimly. His plan depended on perfect timing and a deep understanding of both the creature's behavior and the planet's geological structure. The Void Stalker fed in cycles, absorbing massive amounts of energy before pausing to process what it had consumed. During these processing periods, the creature became temporarily static, concentrating its mass rather than expanding it. 15 minutes until the processing phase begins, Maria announced. Jake Sullivan's team was positioned at the primary lava tube, the main artery that connected the surface volcanic vents to the deep magma chamber. They had spent hours placing explosives at precise points along the tunnel walls, creating a sequence that would redirect the molten rock flow when triggered. Peter Johnson led the group responsible for the secondary charges. These were positioned near the old mining shafts that had been drilled directly into the volcanic system. When detonated in the right order, they would create pressure releases that would force the lava into new channels. The most dangerous position belonged to Danny himself. He was located at the deepest accessible point in the tunnel system, where the mining complex connected to the natural cave networks formed by ancient lava flows. This was where the creature's main feeding tentacle had penetrated deepest into the planet's core. 10 minutes, Maria called out. Danny could feel the heat from the creature's presence even through the thick rock walls. The Void Stalker's feeding was causing temperature fluctuations throughout the volcanic system. Magma that had been stable for decades was now moving in unpredictable patterns. The creature was destabilizing the very foundation of the planet. The key insight, Danny had explained to his team earlier, is that the creature exists in a state of energy equilibrium. It absorbs power from external sources and converts it into physical mass. But what happens if we disrupt that equilibrium from the inside? The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of attacking the creature directly, they would use the planet's own geological forces to create a gravitational anomaly. The redirected lava flows would create massive pressure differentials in the magma chamber, essentially turning the entire volcanic system into a giant trap. 5 minutes, Maria announced. Danny checked his explosive charges one final time. The chemical devices were crude but reliable, designed to create controlled cave-ins that would redirect the lava flows. The timing had to be perfect because they would only get one chance. If the sequence failed, the creature would complete its feeding and move on to consume the rest of the planet. Processing phase beginning now, Maria reported. Through his monitoring equipment, Danny could see the Void Stalker's tentacles pause their movement. The creature had entered its processing cycle, temporarily consolidating its mass, while it converted the absorbed energy into permanent growth. This was the window they had been waiting for. Initiate sequence. Danny spoke into his radio. Jake Sullivan's team triggered the first set of charges. Deep explosions echoed through the mountain as carefully placed explosives collapsed specific sections of the main lava tube. The molten rock flow, previously following its natural downward path, was suddenly forced into horizontal channels that led toward the creature's feeding tentacles. 30 seconds later, Peter Johnson's group detonated their charges. The secondary explosions created pressure releases that acted like valves, directing the redirected lava flow with increased force and precision. The temperature in the tunnels began rising rapidly as thousands of tons of molten rock changed course. Danny waited for his moment, watching the pressure readings on his salvaged monitoring equipment. The magma flow was building to critical levels, but it needed to reach exactly the right pressure before he could trigger the final phase. Pressure at 85% of critical. Maria reported over the radio. The Void Stalker began to react to the changing conditions. Its tentacles started withdrawing from the deepest penetration points as the redirected lava flows reached them, but the creature was still in its processing phase, unable to move quickly enough to avoid the trap. 90%, Maria called out. Danny placed his hand on the trigger device for his charges. These explosives were positioned to create a massive cave-in that would focus all the redirected lava flows into a single concentrated stream aimed directly at the creature's main mass. 95%. The temperature around Danny was becoming unbearable. He could hear the roar of approaching lava through the rock walls. In a few seconds, this entire section of the tunnel system would be flooded with molten rock. He had to time his escape perfectly. Critical pressure reached. Danny triggered his charges and ran. The explosions behind him were deafening, collapsing tunnels and redirecting the full force of the volcanic system toward the Void Stalker's core. He reached the predetermined safe zone just as the redirected lava flows hit their target. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. A concentrated stream of molten rock, moving at incredible pressure and temperature, struck the creature's main feeding tentacle at the moment when its mass was most consolidated. The Void Stalker, which had absorbed energy from countless civilizations, suddenly found itself being pulled into the planet's core by gravitational forces it could not control. The creature tried to withdraw, but the trap was complete. The redirected lava flows had created a gravitational funnel that drew the monster's mass inexorably downward. Every time it tried to expand its form to escape, the molten rock flow increased pressure and pulled it deeper. "It's working, Maria," shouted over the radio. "The creature is being drawn into the core." Danny watched through a crack in the tunnel wall as the impossible happened. The Void Stalker, the unkillable beast that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years, was being consumed by the very planet it had tried to feed upon. The creature's dark mass stretched and twisted as it was pulled into the molten interior. of Paraxis Prime, the final phase was violent and brief. The Void Stalker's form destabilized completely as it was forced into the planet's core. The gravitational anomaly created by the redirected lava flows tore the creature apart at a fundamental level. In less than 5 minutes, the monster that had destroyed entire civilizations was reduced to scattered energy that dissipated harmlessly into space, that the tunnels fell silent except for the distant rumble of settling volcanic activity. Danny and his team had done the impossible. Using nothing but primitive tools, basic chemistry, and human ingenuity, they had defeated the most feared creature in the known galaxy. The unkillable beast was dead, killed by a human slave with a plan that no advanced civilization had ever considered. 3 days after the Void Stalker's destruction, the first rescue ships arrived at Paraxis Prime. They came expecting to find another dead world, another civilization consumed by the unkillable beast. Instead, they discovered something that would shake the foundations of galactic society. Danny Martinez stood in the ruins of the mining complex, watching as Zephyrian rescue vessels landed cautiously on the planet's surface. The aliens emerged from their ships with obvious confusion and fear, unable to understand how their world had survived when so many others had fallen. Overlord Crixtal was among the survivors who had hidden in the deepest bunkers during the attack. He approached Danny with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion in his 6 eyes. "How did you primitives survive when our greatest weapons failed?" he demanded in his grinding voice. "We didn't use weapons," Danny replied simply. "We used the planet." Word of the impossible victory spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. The story was told and retold, each version adding new details, but the core truth remained the same. A group of human slaves had accomplished what no advanced civilization had ever achieved. They had killed the unkillable beast. Lisa Rodriguez found herself speaking to military commanders from dozens of different species. They wanted to understand her tactical approach, how she had organized untrained civilians into an effective fighting force. "We didn't fight it," she explained repeatedly. "We outsmarted it." The Zephyrian High Council convened an emergency session to investigate the events on Paraxis Prime. For the first time in their history, they formally acknowledged that a supposedly primitive species had capabilities they did not understand. The implications were staggering for their entire social structure. Maria Santos was invited to present her research findings to the Galactic Scientific Consortium. Her analysis of the Void Stalker's behavior patterns and feeding cycles became required study material at universities across known space. The creature followed predictable rules, she told audiences of brilliant alien scientists. It just took a different perspective to see them. Peter Johnson became famous for his mechanical innovations during the crisis. His simple timing devices, built from mining equipment, were studied by engineers from the most advanced civilizations. The fact that primitive mechanical systems had succeeded where quantum computers failed challenged fundamental assumptions about technology and progress. Sullivan was offered command positions in multiple military organizations. His leadership during the crisis had demonstrated that experience and wisdom could be more valuable than advanced training or superior technology. He chose to remain with his human companions, helping to negotiate their new status in galactic society. The 5 humans were no longer slaves. They were no longer considered primitive. In a matter of days, they had become the most sought-after consultants, advisors, and experts in the galaxy. Every government, every military organization, every research institution wanted to understand how they had achieved the impossible. Danny found himself at the center of it all. The quiet mining engineer had become a legendary figure whose name was spoken with awe across the galaxy. But he remained focused on the practical implications of what they had accomplished. "The lesson isn't that humans are superior," Danny explained to a gathering of galactic leaders. The lesson is that different approaches to problem solving are valuable. Every species, every culture, every way of thinking adds something important to the whole. The Zephyrian Empire, faced with undeniable evidence of human capabilities, was forced to reconsider its entire approach to other species. Slavery was abolished, not out of moral concern, but out of practical recognition that they had been wasting valuable resources by treating humans as property. Other alien civilizations followed suit. The species that had been conquered and enslaved were suddenly seen as potential allies and partners. The galactic balance of power shifted dramatically as advanced civilizations realized they needed the unique perspectives of supposedly primitive cultures. Danny and his companions were offered positions of honor in governments across the galaxy. They could have had wealth, power, and influence beyond imagination. Instead, they chose a different path. "We want to go home," Danny told the assembled alien dignitaries. "But not as slaves or refugees, as equals." The journey back to human space was unlike anything in galactic history. Danny and his friends traveled aboard the most advanced ships available, treated as honored guests by the same species that had once enslaved them. They were escorted by military fleets and diplomatic convoys, a recognition of their new status as legendary figures. When they reached the human colonies, the reception was overwhelming. The news of their victory had preceded them, spreading through human space like wildfire. They were heroes, legends, proof that humanity belonged among the stars, as equals to any alien civilization. But the real impact of their victory was only beginning to be felt. The story of the human slaves who killed the unkillable beast became a cornerstone myth for humanity's place in the galaxy. It demonstrated that human ingenuity, creativity, and determination could overcome any obstacle. Space exploration increased dramatically as human confidence soared. Colonial expansion accelerated, scientific research flourished, and diplomatic relationships with alien species improved rapidly. The galaxy had learned that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or underestimated. Danny Martinez returned to engineering work, but now he designed systems for interstellar colonies rather than mining equipment. His approach to problem solving, combining advanced knowledge with simple solutions, became a model taught throughout human space. Lisa Rodriguez founded a military academy that trained both humans and aliens in unconventional tactical thinking. Her methods, based on adaptability and creative problem solving rather than superior firepower, revolutionized military strategy across multiple species. Maria Santos established research institutes dedicated to cross-species scientific collaboration. Her work demonstrated that combining different intellectual approaches could solve problems that no single species could handle alone. Peter Johnson developed new technologies that merged advanced alien knowledge with human mechanical ingenuity. His inventions became standard equipment on ships throughout the galaxy. Jake Sullivan became an ambassador, helping to negotiate partnerships between human colonies and alien civilizations. His diplomatic work was based on the principle that every species had unique strengths worth respecting. Years later, when Danny was an old man, children throughout human space would ask him to tell the story of how he killed the unkillable beast. He would smile and correct them gently. "I didn't kill it alone," he would say. "We killed it together by remembering that being human means finding solutions that nobody else expects." The legend of the human slave who killed the Void Stalker became more than just a story. It became proof that humanity's greatest strength was not in matching other species' capabilities, but in approaching challenges from completely different directions. In a galaxy full of advanced civilizations, sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply thinking like a human. The unkillable beast was dead, and humanity had earned its place among the stars through courage, ingenuity, and the simple refusal to accept that any problem was truly impossible to solve.